In this example, we are going to look at a combination of structures and pointers. First of all, let's take a look at the program that we're starting with, the base program. And as you can see, we're using this date struct, which we have used in previous examples. And we have the student record struct, which I have taken out a few things just to eliminate some of the extra typing that I would have to do. But I've added in a comment that says add a link here. So this is where we're going to do something shortly. If we scroll down through the program, then you'll see it's a shell program and there are a lot of comments, and we will fill those in as we go through this example. At the end, I have a reduced version of the enter data. So in this case, we have an enter data function, and we pass in the student by reference. And all this function does is to prompt us to enter some information about the student. This time it's first name, last name, the birth date, the age, and the major. So that's the only thing that we're going to type in. And the print data function will just echo that back to the screen whenever we call it. So that's what we're starting with. Now, let's go back up to the top and let's look at this thing that I have commented here, add a link here. The thing that I want to put in here is a pointer. And it's going to look a little unusual because the type of the pointer is going to be a type student record. Here's how it works. So let's just type in student. Now I'll use the IntelliSense to help me, student record. And that's going to be a pointer to something I am just calling a link. And we'll close that with a semicolon. I'm also going to insist on my way of doing this instead of the Visual Studio's default way by putting the asterisk right there. Now, notice something. This is actually a very important thing, and there will be a great deal of usage for this, more than you can think of, coming up in future lessons and in additional studies concerning data structures and object-oriented programming. So this is a really important thing. It's going to open a lot of doors. Let's examine it. Notice that the structure begins here and it terminates down here. But before we get to the termination, we're adding something that is the same type as this struct up here. So we're defining this structure, but yet within the structure we're using something of the same type. It almost looks recursive. But it is completely syntactically acceptable in C and C++. And as I said earlier, it gives us a great deal of power. But it looks a little weird to have something declared as a type before you finish defining the type. To do some examples, then let's move down inside the main program and let's declare some variables. Let's just start, and of course these are going to be student records. So we'll do student record, and let's just call this, we'll call this one Roger, and let's make him a pointer. Okay, so pointer to Roger, and let's have let's initialize this by doing a new student record. So that will request storage from the operating system. Let's do the same thing for another student. And let's have a pointer here to Susan. And we'll also allocate space for her. We'll ask the operating system to go ahead and set up the space and return the pointer for us. Okay, once again, I'm sorry, I'm insistent. I want the asterisk to be next to the variable. There. Now, in addition to that, let's just declare an ordinary student here. We might want to use this too. Let's say student record, and let's just call that student. Okay, so that's not a pointer, that's just a regular student record. Now these comments that I have here, we're going to wait on those for just a little bit, and let's examine how this new student record works with the link that's embedded. So before we get to all of that, let's put some space here. And let's put in a system pause so that it will stop at that point. And let me get the typing correct on that. All right, so now this is the area that we'll be working with to begin with. We have declared a pointer to a student record for Roger and for Susan, but we haven't put any data there in them. So let's go ahead and do that. And we have the function enter data that lets us do that. So let's do enter data, and let's send it the, in parentheses, we'll send it the record for Roger. And let's also, let's add a little cout statement above that. Okay, it's a double quote, enter data for Roger. Okay, so that tells us what's going on. Alrighty, so we'll enter data for Roger, and we also want to enter data for Susan. So let's also put that in here with some end lines to separate them. All right, ENDL. Then I want to do the same thing for Susan, so let me just copy those lines and paste them here. And we'll change Susan or Roger to Susan. And this will populate, when I use the word populate, that means we're just going to load up these variables with the information that we have here. All right, so let's go ahead at this point and let's go ahead and run the program and enter the data for Roger and for Susan. So I'm going to press the button to do a build, and we'll build the solution. And while that's building, I will just pause the video. Now we have the output window popping up on the screen, so we can enter data for Roger. And now I'm just going to put some data in. So let's put his first name, Roger, let's say Hanson. And the birth date, let's do 2/23/2000. Enter age, I suppose that would be 21. And a major, computer science. Then we'll enter data for Susan, so we'll call the enter data function again. So let's do Susan, and we'll put in her date of birth. Let's make that 6/25/1999. Okay, age and major, let's make that math. And we type enter. Okay, so this then has shown you that we have done this much on our program. We just called the enter data function, and we typed in data for Roger, and we typed in data for Susan. And that shows you what we typed in. So we can stop this and continue with our program. We've shown you what this, how this works. One thing we should notice is when we call the enter data function, if we look at it again closely, then you'll see that we do the first name, the birth date, the age, the major, but we didn't do anything about that link that I added. If you look back at the structure, we added this thing here, this link to a student record. So let's do something with that. So after we've put the data in for Roger and for Susan, then let's also add a link for them. And let's do that before the end line here. All right, now how do we do that? So Roger is a student record. He's a variable of student record. And the way that we get to the link is we do Roger, and we use a little arrow notation. Okay, remember that Roger is a pointer to a student record. So to get to the link field, we do Roger, little arrow, link, and then we set that to null. Okay, now we typically, this is the way it's shown. You could also set it to null pointer. Both of them are equivalent. It's just normally you will see this written as uppercase null. So I'll stick with that. Then we need to do the same thing for Susan. So let's just copy and paste this, and we'll complete Susan's record by setting her link to null. All right, so this means now that we have completely filled up all of the data fields, all the members of this structure for both Roger and for Susan. Well, what do we use this link for? Well, we are going to want to link Roger's record, his information, with Susan's. So as an example, let me show you how we can do that. I'm just going to put a comment here to indicate that's what we want to do. Okay, link Roger's record to Susan. Now, what that means is that I want to take the link that is in Roger's, let me call it node in Roger's information, and I want to reset it from null so that it now is Susan. So it's easy enough to do. We just do Roger and a little arrow notation, link equal Susan. That's all we need to do. Now, Roger is linked to Susan. So make sure you understand what's going on with this. Susan is a pointer to a student record, and so is Roger. So Roger and Susan both, those are pointers, they're addresses, so we can assign them like this. Now, let's output some information and compare these. What if we wanted to print out Roger's name? We could do cout, Roger, and a little arrow notation again, and print out first name. And it pops up here nicely. And let's put the last name too with a space in between. So I'll copy and paste, and we'll print out his last name. Just change first name here to last name. Alrighty, and then end line. Let's print out Susan's as well. All right, well, I'll just copy this, paste it, and change Roger to Susan. So we can access her first and last name. And if we were to compile and run this program, then of course it would print out Roger Hanson and it would print out Susan Smith. But let's do one more thing. And this is a very critical step in understanding what's going on. Since we set Roger's link to Susan, then let's use Roger's link to print out Susan's information. How does that look like? Or what does that look like? So let's do a cout. Okay, Roger, little arrow notation, link, then what? This is a link to Susan. Roger's link points to Susan. So we can use that link to get to Susan's information by doing another little arrow notation. And first name, and let's print out a space, and we'll also print out her last name using Roger's link. We'll paste that in, and we'll put an end line here. This is critical. Make sure you understand what's going on. We're taking the link out of Roger's structure, and we're using it to point to Susan and then print out her first name. And over here, I need to change that to last name. And of course, we could continue to print out all of the other information related to Susan using this same technique. But let's stop here and run the program and see what we get. I have taken the time to go ahead and type in all the information for Roger and for Susan without recording it. That saved a bit of time on the video. You've seen that already. Now, after I've typed in all their information, I'm going to hit enter, and we will see the name show up. And let's pull this over and look at where that code is. Okay, so Roger Hanson. Okay, so Roger Hanson and Susan Smith, those two lines, those come from these two cout statements here. So we just directly link, use the link to get to Roger's last name and Susan's last name. The other Susan Smith, that's the last thing printed, that comes from this cout statement. So you can see by using Roger's link, we can access Susan's information and print out her first name and her last name. So make sure you understand what's going on here. As I've said too many times already, it's going to be really important in upcoming courses that you take, and also in doing a lot of the very powerful things you can do with C and C++. Now this video is ongoing now for about 15 minutes, so I want to go ahead and stop at this point, and I'll close this video, and then we'll come back and continue this by creating the other stuff that's shown here. We'll do that in the next video. So that's all for now.